Anything else to share? I know.
I would say that you guys, as a district, haven't had a first interim approved with the 3 years for quite some time. I would also say that a lot of the things that we're looking at are going to ensure that that'll carry on into the future. I believe that the declining enrollment issue is a substantial one, but that tends to be a substantial one for most districts in Southern California. I would also say that there's ways to increase the funding for this budget with watching the attendance and also the free and reduced lunch rate. We just got the CalPADS information today, and I will tell you that if you increase that free and reduced lunch rate, that kicks in additional funding with the second half of the local control funding formula. That should be a real positive for us and a real priority, and it certainly is for me. LA County Office of Education continues to support whatever we can do, and we're involved in all of the various audits and the FICMAT audit, which includes a facilities audit and adult ed audit. Christy White is the external auditor that represents the district's day-to-day operation. We're answering back to federal program management here, and we're currently going to be working with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which I'll be involved in all that in a support role. I actually think as we get up on our feet that we need to review any type of expenditures that we're making and just make sure that everything can stand the test of time, and as many eyes as we can put on that, in as many ways that we can provide to you a board agenda that's a lot more user-friendly for a school board, that shows maybe what the processes are to get that to you. There shouldn't be any real surprises. So this is the kind of refinement that we're going through. I was actually quite pleased that we were able to get that to LA County ahead of schedule. And it represents a chance to start looking at how we improve the bond rating and a lot of other things, because until that all turns around, we're not going to be able to sell any bonds or do anything like that. So we need to be really careful on how we spend every nickel that goes into those programs. So I'll be involved in that any way and every way that I can. But I want to just thank the staff for helping put all this together. And as a district, you should be very pleased because you have an awful lot of good people here. You have a lot of good teachers, you have a lot of good classified, and you have a lot of good management folks. That all of this has just been as tough on them as it has on you folks. But I actually believe that we just keep our nose to the grindstone on this. We'll try to get everybody out of the woods and, get, as they say, get the dog off the door and get back into a position where the district can spend more time really worrying about textbook adoptions, which should be a big priority, as opposed to this kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Yes, Dr.
So, I have 3 questions and 3 items. So the first one you mentioned was about bidding, right, and looking at contracts. And I was really pleased to see that our agendas now actually have a list of the different companies that have been bid, because at least since the year that I came in here, that was never the case. Right, we never really knew that information. So I'm really glad that staff is including that information, that the agendas are being cleaned up a lot more and much more transparent than it has been in the past. The question I actually had was, one of the things that was raised in the audit, right, and it was constantly posed, was this notion of our district engaging in deficit spending, right? And it was, at least for myself, with a lot of the questions that were coming forward to me, a reflection of the board, a reflection of the district, and the way that its practices have always been. We were basically, I guess, to use Ms. Prokowski's words, in the dark all the time about, you guys are engaging in deficit spending. Could you please maybe discuss a little bit for the members of the public what exactly is deficit spending, and put it in the context of whether or not this district has in fact been engaging in it?
I actually have had the pleasure to teach in the FICMAT and the CASBO School Business Academy, and also have been a mentor in that program for years. So I've been involved with helping young folks become chief business officers. And also, as a matter of fact, even this year, was involved with the Access Superintendent's Academy, working with the young superintendents that want to be superintendents. I would actually say to you that it's real easy to prove if you deficit spend. If you go to your unaudited actuals at the end of the year, the first interim, second interim, unaudited actuals, and you look and see what that unaudited actuals figure is, opposed to where you started at the beginning of the year. Unless a district is going bankrupt, I think the term deficit spending is overused. I think the term should be deficit budgeting. I can put together a budget that would show a deficit every year based upon my projections, but that's not the actual thing that happens. This district has not deficit spent, it's deficit budgeted. Now, it's had declines in revenue, and it's had declines in enrollment, and a lot of other things, whether it be a free and reduced rate decline or what have you. But that does not say you're deficit spending. That says you're deficit budgeting. If I set myself up at a budget for 3 years as an adult, and I say, okay, I'm gonna forecast for 3 years where I'm going to be, chances are I'm gonna be very conservative on that, and I'm gonna figure that I may overspend on the first year or whatever, but that's nothing more than a journal entry as opposed to the actual act of spending more than you've got. So I don't believe that that happens, and I would argue that point anywhere I had to up and down the state. I do not believe that happens, rarely, in the state of California, but it's a term that tends to be overused. So if we're gonna just be honest with ourselves, which we should be, it's deficit budgeting as opposed to deficit spending.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My last question is actually related to the textbook adoption. It's very painful because this board was really dedicated to trying to make sure that we got these textbooks into our classrooms, right? That we get into the hands of our students and the teachers, the technology were really, it was very disappointing and very difficult decision to make. And I know that we are looking at a 3-year projection, but is there any way that we can work toward something that we're going to be bringing those textbooks in a lot sooner than what we're thinking about?
I think that if you look at the financials for the state of California for the current year, I think the governor has under forecast revenues for this state for this current year. I think that in January, along with his discussion about the budget for the following year, someone's going to have to fess up that this budget's a lot healthier in the current year than a lot of people are forecasting. Now, granted, I would actually argue that the governor doesn't like to make these additional funds part of a Prop 98 guarantee, because that becomes ongoing money. And I don't like the fact that we get cheated out of that. A lot of times that gets broken down into block grants, and I would believe that you would maybe have some additional block grant money in the current year, or additional money that may come to you as ongoing at the current year. But above and beyond that, this district is a big budget, and I just think that no matter whatever else you have to do, whether you have to cut from here or cut from there or whatever, without hurting the employees, because they bear a lot of brunt of this too, that those textbooks for those kids should be a priority, and I would completely agree. And I guess we need to report back to you where we think we could find that or locate that in this budget.
If you can, I'd appreciate it. Really good.
Absolutely.
Mr. Skvarna, can you kind of just quickly point me to the multi-year projections operating surplus? I mean, I saw the assigned fund balance, but can you just... Off
the top of my head, I'm gonna, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was only 1% earlier, and I pretty well memorized this. 19% at year one, or is that 20? 19% reserve at year one, 16% reserve at year two. 70, I'm off one. And a 10% at year three. So that is the 69.6 that you see, the 60.0, and the 35.7, and those are based upon some really, really conservative enrollment figures. I have no problem sleeping at night looking at those. They're not overstated at all. So any additional monies that this district could bring in by being smart on free and reduced lunch rate, by being smart on attendance, working with our teachers, and especially our teachers on helping note with parents on free and reduced, and the Teachers Association is said that they would be helpful any way that they could on this free and reduced, because that really